give very quickly, in hopefully less than 10 minutes, my observations about this draft management plan. The first two things that I want to touch on are the aims and the goals. I've got these aims from the website, and the aims, if you have a look at those aims, they're about, to a certain extent, they're about governance, but they're also about production. So the point that I want to make, if you look at those aims, these aims, by the way, aren't in the draft management plan. They're on the website that takes you to the draft management plan. The emphasis is on timber harvesting and forest production, wood production, and there's also an emphasis on water production elsewhere in the document. But I want to focus a little bit about how forest management is destined to be judged. It's destined to be judged under this plan by these sustainability criteria. There are 7 or 8 of them, depending on where you might look in the document. So in the document itself, it then gives you a range of goals. The main goals in formulating this draft plan that come from the Conservation Commission, and they're about biodiversity to be conserved, Aboriginal, other Australian cultural heritage and so on. What I want to do is to give you my observations of how good these criteria are, or rather, how not good these criteria are, because there are some elements of them that are good, but I think what we have to focus on is how that they can be improved between this draft plan and what might come in the future. So the first thing is the biodiversity, this goal of having biodiversity being conserved. Well, it really depends on how good our monitoring and evaluation processes are for the activities that are undertaken in the forest. And as far as I can tell, that depends almost entirely on the veracity or how good this monitoring system is that they call Forest Check. My sense, if you have a look at that, the documentation that's coming out, is that they make sweeping generalisations about the whole of biodiversity based on some fairly rudimentary sets of measures. Some measures that are valuable, some measures that, in fact, there are measures that are completely missing. I think the microbial suite, things that we should be looking at in the litter layer and in the soil itself, the surface of the soil, those things are missing completely. So when you make sweeping generalisations about forest management not leading to any loss of biodiversity, there's no documented evidence and those types of things, you really need to have a very, very good set of data to be able to do that. My comment is that they don't. The second one about Aboriginal and Australian cultural heritage, Piers was exactly right. I mean, this is Nyungar land, Nyungar responsibility, Nyungar ownership, and we should be hearing from Nyungar people on this one in particular. But we also, Winds, if you like, have a way of judging this, and internationally, there are cultural ecosystem services that we can use to get a sense of where those values are and how they're compromised, if you like, by the way that we deal with timber harvesting or forest production or whatever it is. This third one about health, vitality and productive capacity of ecosystems to be sustained sounds like a fantastic goal, but I'm really not sure about it. There's an overemphasis in the document on production, as I've said half a dozen times already. I don't know what vitality means, and it's not defined anywhere in the document. It doesn't help us at all about that. It's a fantastic word, but it gives us no guidance. And this thing about health, again, fantastic to have health dealt with there. There's nothing about human health in there. There's very little about human well-being. There is something about ecosystem health, but again, it's not defined and it's incredibly vague. So we can do a lot better than this. I mean, global literature has taken us well beyond what we're presented with in this document. So we can do a lot better than that. The one about soil and water resources to being protected, well, there's a constant reference to water production and to an emphasis on surface water. Well, it's good to have an emphasis on surface water and a sense that you're connecting forest management to hydrology. That's fantastic. But don't emphasise it in such a way that all you want to do is harvest the water. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to see water incorporated into all of the facets of the ecosystem. So it's not just about surface water, it's about soil moisture, and it's about groundwater, it's about the whole hydrological cycle. And the sooner we get a grip of that, we're better. As far as soils go, it's all about, if you look at the detail in the forest management plan is about soil disturbance. And soil disturbance, of course, is important, but it's about soil health that we should be concentrating on. I talked about microbial ecology, the importance of microbial ecology, and how that needs to be a focus of this draft management plan. This stuff about global carbon cycles, if you have a look at the literature that they've used, really important that it's there as a goal, but the literature that they've used is about 5 years old, and this is such a fast-moving field that it's nowhere near the cutting edge. We should be demanding much more up-to-date. This is for the next 10 years, so at least use 2012 literature, for goodness sake. And then the last one that I'm going to focus on is this thing about trade-offs. So all of these things about social, cultural, economic benefits, there are mechanisms now that are used in the international literature about using ecosystem services and where the trade-offs are made between ecosystem services. So if you're taking something out of the forest or if you're extracting something, what's being traded off in that process? And there are very sophisticated mechanisms to do that. This is 2005. Again, this is really quite old, this diagram. But the thing about, you've got supporting ecosystem services that deal with nutrient cycling, soil formation, primary production, provisioning is what you actually take, or what's provided from an ecosystem, and then regulating, how does the ecosystem regulate hydrology, climate, disease, water purification, flood regulation, and so on. And then there's a whole range of cultural ecosystem services. The reason I'm putting this there is firstly that it's all linked to human well-being, and the sooner we make those links tangibly, the better. And then, but also the point about this is that you can start seeing where those trade-offs are made. If you take wood and fibre out of an ecosystem, what does it do? Where are you making trade-offs? What's lost in terms of the ecosystem services? So you can evaluate all of your management options, all of your scenarios based on this simple way of looking at what an ecosystem provides for you. So here are two scenarios that were given in the management plan for sustained yield. These two scenarios, they make a lot of this in the draft forest management plan. Scenario 1 is high sustained yield, and scenario 2 is low sustained yield. I don't know how you can have two different sustained yields, but it's based on, because isn't there just one sustained yield? I mean, isn't there an optimal sustained yield? But there's not, apparently. It's based on all of these settings. But there's a way of evaluating these sustained yields. And anyway, what they've provided us with is, do you want the high sustained yield or do you want the low sustained yield? And these are the settings by which we make these sorts of judgments. I think that's really problematic. I think it's problematic for a number of reasons. But they don't just do this with sustained yield, they also do it with management options. So I've counted, or they counted for you, there are 14 different management options in this draft management plan. So 2 scenarios and 14 management options. Is this a management plan or is it a consultation paper? Do they want us to choose? Do they want us to argue for one or the other? When we do this in first year university, how scientists argue, we call this a false dichotomy, isn't it? It's not just 2 scenarios, there's a whole range of scenarios that you could do. Why are you just giving us these 2 scenarios, and why are you not evaluating the scenarios that you've done in a systematic way? So I thought, well, since we're dealing with scenarios, I can give you some scenarios, but you could all come up with scenarios. So what if we emphasise the emphasis, or we shifted the emphasis away from forests being, from forests being state-owned and managed by a policy determined, from kilometres away, to ones that are locally cherished? What if these forests are locally cherished and cared for? What if we managed for locally? What if we did this stuff locally? What if we said, people in the forest, next to the forest, let's do this locally, this stuff, and generate the values like soil organics, soil health, where fire was. If we tried to deal with fire as a local phenomenon at the hectare scale or smaller, and this we did, and spread it out over, can't we do that? Can't we even imagine that might be done? instead of burning 10,000 hectares at one hit, or more when it escapes. What about if we managed forests more explicitly for human well-being? Why isn't human well-being one of the first things you get to in the forest management plan? And what if we manage forests for a full range of ecosystem services and recognise where trade-offs were occurring and where we sought debate over those trade-offs and negotiated it that way? I should have started with this one. What if we said this forest management plan is to enable us to see forests as being able to moderate the climate in the future? And that's its purpose, that's its main goal. What if you started with that as your premise? And you said, let's try and keep the southwest forests wet, rather than use a range of processes to dry them, to thin them, or to clear them, or to burn them. It's all about drying. Let's keep the canopy, let's keep the organics, let's keep the litter layer, let's keep the soil moisture, let's try and keep them wet. And in doing that, we might be able to ameliorate our and what if we could phase out by 2023? What if we could phase out the systematic removal of trees from native forests? If we did need to take trees, what if we could take trees, one tree, carefully every now and again, and treated it like a living being if we needed to? I've said enough.